Daniel, with your permission, I will borrow the term. You said internet is a social phenomenon. Cybersecurity also, I think, is a social phenomenon, and I will borrow it from you. And I think the social thread implicit in everything you talked about, every one of you. And this leads me to the last question in this panel. And we heard from you, Steve, about this scenario planning. And I would like to read you one sentence from one of your scenarios, the Omega scenario, and ask you to talk a little bit about it. It's trying to picture a scenario in the year 2020, and the scenario is like this. Data scientists of 2020 have developed profoundly powerful models capable of predicting and manipulating the behavior of single individuals with a high degree of accuracy. Something like this, of course, can change the life of all of us. Can you speak a little bit about this?
This is a great extension of Dan's second most attractive computer science subspecialty, the ability to do machine learning at a deep level at scale much more quickly and with much larger data sets than any of us really, I think, believed was possible maybe 3 or 4 years ago. What we were doing here was experimenting with the idea that much of the effort that in my world, in the political world, in the social setting world, that is today extended or expended in trying to understand the behavior of social aggregates, groups of people, political parties, nations, all of which are ultimately conglomerations of large numbers of individuals. And typically in our world of the social sciences, it's been much easier. There's a lot of variation in how individuals behave, and it's actually been much easier to look at the behavior of those large aggregates where some of that variation washes out. In other words, the repertoire of what we would expect states to do in traditional security environments, when they fight wars, when they attack each other's internet-enabled systems, that repertoire was ultimately relatively constrained, and as hard as it was to be accurate, at least we knew what the range of behaviors was likely to be, and that was almost impossible to do for individuals, because individuals were ultimately so much harder to understand, so much harder to predict, and so much more innovative in a sense, in that they would be able to root around the rules in ways that large social aggregates just don't do as well. And what we were experimenting with is a kind of an upside-down turn in that paradigm, where machine learning combined with the availability of extraordinarily granular data about the previous behaviors of any particular individual might make it actually much easier to predict and thus manipulate or control or influence in predictable ways the behavior of specific single people as compared to those large social aggregates. This has enormous consequences that you can begin to imagine and think about and deduce. I'll just mention two. On the one hand, for some commercial actors, this is the holy grail. In marketing, it's sometimes called the segment of one. And if I can design a product or design an advertisement that touches you uniquely in the areas that are most important to your interests or your fears or your hopes, then I've achieved what I've wanted to achieve without having to think about you as a representative of some class of people. But of course, it also creates the possibility of the manipulation of individual decision makers who have impact and influence across broader groups of people, whether that be the CEO of a large corporation, whether it be a teacher who is spreading a set of beliefs or knowledge among large groups of people, and of course, most obviously, a political leader whose behavioral profile today is typically assessed by psychologists at a distance, looking at public pronouncements and the little bit of information we have about that person's background. Imagine what it would be like if we actually understood in a granular specific, precise way why that person was doing what they were doing over the last 10 years with that data trail, and giving us the ability to actually predict at a fairly high level of accuracy and specificity what they were going to do next.
Thank you. This, by the way, reminds me a very old story by Isaac Asimov, where the computer selects one person that will decide who will be the next president of the United States of America or of Earth, that in this story. I would like to thank all the panelists here and everyone. And I think that the last idea that was emerging here, that although most of us here are computer scientists, most of you, still the social thread that came out of it, I think is a very, very solid idea. We should all look what is the implication of this idea. And I hope to see you next week at the at the Tel Aviv University National Week, Cyber Week, and the International Conference, and next year here too, in the Herzliya Conference. Thank you very much.